Every morning, long before the first executives arrived, Daniel was already inside the building. At 5:30 a.m., when the streets were still quiet and the city lights were fading against the early morning sky, he pushed his cleaning cart through the glass doors of Sterling Global **, one of the most powerful companies in the country. The building was enormous. 30 floors of shining glass, polished marble, expensive offices, and conference rooms where millions of dollars were discussed over coffee. People came here wearing expensive suits and carrying laptops worth more than Daniel's monthly salary. And almost none of them noticed him. Daniel had worked there for 7 years. He knew which elevator made a strange noise. He knew which conference room always had a broken light. He knew which executives stayed late. He even knew which employees secretly cried in the bathroom after difficult meetings. But most people only knew him as the janitor star. Move that cart. You're blocking the hallway. Can you clean this before my meeting? Don't touch anything on that desk. Those were the kinds of words Daniel heard every day. He rarely complained. He simply smiled, nodded, and continued working. Daniel was a tall African man in his early 40s, with tired eyes and a calm face. His uniform was always clean, even though the work itself was difficult. He believed that honest work deserved pride. Every morning, he cleaned the floors until they shone. He emptied trash bins, wiped conference tables, cleaned bathrooms, and made sure the offices looked perfect before the employees arrived. But Daniel did something else. He watched. He listened. And he remembered. That was something people never noticed. They thought because Daniel carried a mop, he could not understand the conversations happening around him. They were wrong. Sterling Global had been successful for years. Its offices were filled with awards, photographs, and newspaper articles celebrating its growth. The CEO, Mr. Richard Coleman, was known throughout the business world. He was wealthy, powerful, and extremely demanding. He expected results. Nothing less. Numbers don't care about excuses, he often told his managers. And everyone knew what that meant. If you failed, you were replaced. But recently, something had gone wrong. Orders were being delayed. Important shipments were disappearing. Clients were complaining. One major customer had already threatened to cancel its contract. Another had stopped placing new orders. Behind the company's beautiful walls, fear was spreading. Managers stayed late. Executives held secret meetings. Phones rang constantly. People whispered in hallways. Daniel noticed all of it. One afternoon, while cleaning the hallway outside the executive conference room, he saw 3 senior managers rush inside. Their faces looked frightened. Daniel lowered his eyes and continued wiping the floor. But he heard one sentence as the door closed. "We have less than 2 weeks before they walk away." Daniel stopped for half a second. Then he continued working. 2 weeks. He had heard similar things before. But this time, something felt different. That evening, long after most employees had gone home, Daniel was cleaning near the loading area. He noticed something unusual. A truck that was supposed to arrive at 6 had arrived nearly 2 hours late. Daniel looked at the clock. Then at the truck. Then at the driver. Something about it bothered him. He had seen this before. Not once. Not twice. Several times. Different trucks. Different days. But always the same strange delay. Daniel slowly pushed his cleaning cart away. For the first time, he began wondering whether the company's biggest problem was not happening inside the computers or boardrooms. Maybe the answer was hiding somewhere much closer. Somewhere everyone walked past. And perhaps the man everyone ignored was the only person who had been watching closely enough to see it. By Monday morning, Sterling Global no longer felt like the same company. The polished floors were still shining. The expensive cars still filled the parking lot. The elevators still carried employees to their offices. But something had changed. Fear had entered the building. People spoke in low voices. Managers avoided eye contact. Phones rang without stopping, and every time someone walked out of a meeting, the rest of the employees watched their face, trying to guess what had happened. The company's biggest problem was no longer a small delay. It was a disaster. Sterling Global's production and delivery system had begun failing again and again. Orders were leaving the factories late. Some shipments were sent to the wrong locations. Others disappeared from the tracking system completely. Millions of dollars had already been lost. And the worst part was that nobody knew why. At first, The company blamed the computer system. A team of expensive technology experts was brought in. They spent days checking servers, software, security systems, and databases. They found several small problems. They fixed them. For 3 days, everything appeared normal. Then another shipment failed. The company blamed the warehouse. New managers were sent to inspect the loading areas. They changed schedules, replaced workers, and added new security checks. Again, things improved. For a few days. Then the same problem returned. After that, people started blaming each other. Warehouse workers blamed the drivers. Drivers blamed the managers. Managers blamed the technology department. The technology department blamed the warehouse. Soon, even loyal employees began wondering who they could trust. Daniel saw all of it. Every day, he moved silently through the building with his cleaning cart. He heard arguments through half-open doors. He saw reports left behind in conference rooms. He noticed damaged equipment that had been replaced without anyone explaining why. He watched employees suddenly change their routines. And he remembered. 7 years inside that building had taught Daniel something no expensive consultant could learn in a week. The company had patterns. People had patterns too. A certain manager always visited the loading area before a shipment went wrong. A particular employee often stayed late on the nights when problems appeared. Certain reports were always printed and then quickly thrown away. Daniel had noticed these things long ago, but he had never thought they were connected. Now he wasn't so sure. One evening, Daniel was cleaning the executive conference room after a meeting. A stack of papers had been left on the table. He was about to throw them away when he noticed a chart showing delivery failures. Daniel stopped. He studied it quietly. Then his eyes narrowed. The dates looked familiar. He remembered those dates. On several of those nights, he had been working late. He remembered trucks arriving after midnight. He remembered employees entering the storage area when they were not normally scheduled to be there. He remembered a machine near the loading dock making a strange sound. Daniel slowly placed the paper back on the table. His heart began beating faster. Maybe these failures weren't random. The next morning, Mr. Richard called an emergency meeting. Every senior manager was inside the boardroom. Daniel was cleaning the hallway outside when the CEO's angry voice suddenly echoed through the closed doors. "We have lost millions of dollars." Silence followed. Then Richard continued. "I don't care how much you have spent on consultants. I don't care how many excuses I've heard." Daniel stopped pushing his cart. "We have 7 days," the CEO said. 7 days to find the cause. If you fail, people will lose their jobs. The words fell heavily through the hallway. Daniel looked down at his hands. 7 years of cleaning that building had taught him where people went when they thought nobody was watching. The executives saw the company from their offices. Daniel saw it from the hallways, from the storage rooms, from the loading docks, from maintenance areas, from empty conference rooms after everyone had gone home. He had seen things they had never seen. And now, for the first time, Daniel wondered if those forgotten details could explain everything. He slowly pushed his cart forward. But his mind was no longer focused on cleaning. He was thinking about the same question again and again. Asterisk asterisk, what if the company's biggest problem had been hiding in plain sight all along? Asterisk asterisk. The next morning, Daniel arrived earlier than usual. He had barely slept. The CEO's warning kept repeating in his mind. 7 days. 7 days to find the reason behind millions of dollars in losses. Daniel knew he was only a janitor. No one had asked for his opinion. No manager would probably care what he had noticed. Still, something inside him refused to let the matter go. At 6:15 a.m., Daniel was cleaning the executive hallway when he noticed a crumpled sheet of paper near a trash bin. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the company logo. Daniel stopped. He picked it up carefully and unfolded it. It was a delivery report. His eyes moved across the page. Then he froze. One shipment was marked asterisk asterisk delivered asterisk asterisk at 8:40 p.m. Daniel remembered that shipment. He had been cleaning the loading area that night. The truck had not left until almost midnight. Daniel looked at the report again. "That can't be right," he whispered. He checked another line. Another shipment was listed as completed. Daniel remembered seeing that same truck return to the building the following morning. His heart began beating faster. He looked around the empty hallway. Nobody was there. He folded the paper and placed it in his cleaning cart. For the rest of the morning, Daniel could not stop thinking about it. He remembered the strange delays, the late trucks, the damaged equipment, the employees entering restricted areas, the reports that suddenly disappeared. At first, each detail had seemed unimportant. Now they were beginning to form a picture. Daniel spent his lunch break sitting alone in a small staff room. He placed the report on the table. Then he took out a small notebook. For years, Daniel had written down things he noticed around the building. Not secrets, just reminders. Broken equipment, maintenance problems, unusual deliveries, times when employees stayed late. He began comparing the dates. His hands slowly stopped shaking. There was a pattern. The company's biggest delivery failures often happened shortly after certain employees accessed specific systems or departments. Daniel stared at the notebook. He suddenly felt afraid. This was no longer just a workplace problem. Someone might be causing it. But who? And why? Daniel thought about reporting everything to management. Then he imagined what would happen. A janitor walking into the executive office with secret company reports. They might laugh at him. They might accuse him of stealing. They might fire him. And Daniel could not afford to lose his job. His wife had died several years earlier, leaving him to raise his young daughter alone. Every paycheck paid for food, rent, school fees, and medicine. Daniel had no savings large enough to survive a long period without work. This job was not simply a job. It was the roof over his daughter's head. The reason she could stay in school. The reason Daniel could tell her that tomorrow would be better. He looked down at the report. For a moment, he considered putting it back where he found it. Maybe someone else would discover the truth. Maybe it was safer to stay silent. Then Daniel remembered the nervous faces around the building. The warehouse workers. The drivers. The office assistants. The cleaners. Hundreds of ordinary people could lose their jobs if Sterling Global collapsed. Daniel slowly closed his notebook. He had spent years being ignored. He knew what it felt like when powerful people decided your voice did not matter. But he also knew something else. Sometimes staying silent was its own kind of choice. Daniel folded the report and placed it safely inside his notebook. His fear was still there. But now something stronger had joined it. Determination. He stood up, picked up his cleaning cart, and walked back into the hallway. For the first time in 7 years, Daniel was not simply cleaning the company's offices. He was looking for the truth. And somewhere inside Sterling Global, someone had made a serious mistake. They had left a clue in the trash. And Daniel had found it. Daniel spent most of the night thinking about the report. By morning, he had made a decision. He could not keep everything to himself. He needed to tell someone. The first person he approached was Mr. Harris, the floor supervisor. Daniel waited until Harris finished his morning inspection. Then he stepped forward with his notebook held tightly against his chest. "Sir, can I show you something?" Harris barely looked at him. "What is it?" Daniel opened the notebook and showed him the delivery dates. "I've noticed something strange. Some deliveries are being marked complete before the trucks actually leave. I think these failures might be connected." Harris stared at the page for a few seconds. Then he laughed. "Daniel, what exactly are you trying to do?" "I'm only trying to help." "You're a janitor." The words were simple, but they hurt. Daniel lowered his eyes. Harris continued. "These are company operations. Managers and engineers are handling them. You should focus on your cleaning duties." "But I've seen the trucks." "Enough." Harris closed the notebook. "Don't involve yourself in things you don't understand." Daniel stood silently. He wanted to explain that he had spent 7 years watching the building. He wanted to tell Harris that he knew the loading area better than most managers. But he knew it would not matter. Harris handed the notebook back. "And Daniel." "Yes, sir." "Do not take company documents again. You could get yourself into serious trouble." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "I didn't steal anything." "I didn't say you did." But the warning was clear. As Daniel walked away, 2 employees nearby whispered to each other. One of them laughed. Imagine the janitor solving $1 billion problem. The other smiled. Maybe he should become the CEO. They laughed. Daniel kept walking. He had heard worse. Still, their words followed him down the hallway. For a moment, he wondered if they were right. Maybe he was foolish to think he could help. Maybe his place really was behind the cleaning cart. Then his phone rang. It was an internal company alert. Another major client had announced that it was considering cancelling its contract. Daniel looked toward the executive floor. Within minutes, people were rushing into meetings. Doors slammed. Phones rang. And then Mr. Richards' voice echoed through the hallway. How many more clients do we have to lose before someone gives me an answer? The building became silent. Daniel stood near the elevator and listened. The CEO was furious. Find the problem. His voice shook the room. We have 7 days. Daniel slowly pushed his cart away. But something caught his attention. Near the loading area, a system technician was entering a restricted room. Daniel checked the time. 2:17 p.m. He recognized the employee. The same man had been near the system on another day when a shipment failed. Daniel watched quietly. The technician entered the room. 10 minutes later, a delivery status changed. Daniel's heart sank. He pulled out his notebook. ***, 2:17 p.m. Restricted room. ***. He wrote down the location. Then the employee's name. Then the time the delivery status changed. This time, Daniel did not rely on memory. He began recording everything. Dates, times, locations, employee movements, truck arrivals, system changes, unexpected maintenance. By the end of the week, several pages were filled. And something strange was happening. The details were beginning to connect. The same people appeared around the same systems. The same departments were involved. The same type of delivery problem followed. Daniel sat alone that evening in the empty staff room and studied his notes. His breathing became slower. His eyes moved from one page to another. Suddenly, the pattern became clear. This was not random. It was not simply a broken computer system. Someone was doing something. Daniel closed the notebook. For the first time, he was no longer asking whether the company had a technical problem. He was asking a much more frightening question. Who was causing it? Daniel had spent 3 nights studying his notes. The more he looked at them, the more uncomfortable he became. The failures were not random. Someone was creating them. The evidence was small, almost invisible. A delivery status changed at the wrong time. A system was accessed minutes before a shipment failed. A truck was redirected without a clear reason. Individually, none of these things seemed important. Together, they told a different story. Someone inside Sterling Global was deliberately damaging the company. And whoever was doing it knew exactly what they were doing. They were not causing obvious problems. They were creating failures that looked normal. A computer error. A late driver. A broken machine. A missing shipment. Nothing that would immediately look like sabotage. Daniel's hands became cold. He knew someone had access to important systems. But who? A junior worker could not easily do this. The person would need knowledge, access, and confidence. That meant the truth could be much closer to the top than Daniel had imagined. He closed his notebook. For several minutes, he simply stared at the wall. Then he thought about the workers in the warehouse. Earlier that afternoon, he had overheard 2 managers discussing the crisis. They were preparing to blame a group of warehouse employees. "They're careless," one manager had said. "If we need someone to take responsibility, they'll be the easiest choice." Daniel's stomach tightened. He knew some of those workers. They were fathers, mothers, young people trying to support their families. If the company blamed them, they could lose everything. Daniel understood that feeling. He had spent most of his life working hard while powerful people made decisions about people like him. He could not stand by and watch innocent workers become victims. That evening, Daniel made another decision. He would find proof. But he would be careful. He stopped writing names where someone could easily see them. Instead, he used simple marks and numbers in his notebook. He recorded dates. He recorded times. He wrote down which doors were opened and when. He memorized details instead of writing everything down. And whenever he saw something suspicious, he acted as if he had noticed nothing. For several days, everything seemed normal. Then things changed. On Wednesday morning, Daniel arrived at work and discovered that his cleaning cart had been moved. That alone was not unusual. But one of the drawers was open. His notebook was still there. He checked it quickly. Nothing seemed missing. Yet Daniel knew he had closed that drawer the night before. He said nothing. The next day, his work schedule changed. He was suddenly assigned to floors he had never cleaned before. His usual area was given to another worker. Daniel found it strange. Nobody explained why. Then, while he was cleaning a hallway near the technology department, a senior employee stopped beside him. The man looked around before speaking. "You should be careful about what you notice." Daniel slowly looked up. "What do you mean?" The employee gave a small smile. "Some things are better left alone." Then he walked away. Daniel stood completely still. His heart was pounding. That was not advice. It was a warning. Someone knew. Maybe not everything. But someone had noticed Daniel was watching. That night, Daniel stayed late. He waited until the building became quiet. Then he walked toward the loading area. The lights were dim. The hallway was empty. Daniel checked his notebook. One particular employee had appeared around almost every major failure. And tonight, that employee was inside the building. Daniel heard footsteps. He quickly moved behind a storage room door. A figure walked past. Daniel held his breath. The person stopped. For a moment, Daniel thought they had seen him. Then the footsteps continued. Daniel waited several seconds before looking outside. The hallway was empty again. He slowly released his breath. Fear was beginning to replace curiosity. This was no longer just about saving the company. Someone powerful might be protecting the person responsible. And if Daniel was right, then every step he took toward the truth made him a bigger target. He looked down at his worn cleaning uniform. For years, that uniform had made him invisible. Now he wondered if invisibility was the only thing keeping him safe. Daniel closed his notebook and whispered to himself that he needed proof strong enough that nobody could dismiss him again. Then he walked back into the darkness of the empty building. He did not know it yet, but someone had already started watching him. And Daniel was getting dangerously close to the truth. Friday began with a silence that felt wrong. Daniel knew something was happening before anyone said a word. The employees walking through the lobby were pale. Phones were ringing everywhere. Managers were rushing between offices. Even the security guards looked nervous. Then Daniel heard the news. The company's largest shipment had disappeared. It was worth millions of dollars. The shipment had been scheduled to arrive at a major client that morning, but the tracking system showed that it had never reached its destination. Worse, the system claimed the shipment had been delivered. Daniel stopped pushing his cart. His heart sank. He knew that pattern. A delivery marked complete when it wasn't. Exactly like the report he had found in the trash. But this time, the damage was much bigger. The client had threatened to cancel its contract immediately. Other clients were demanding explanations. Inside the company, fear spread like fire. Employees whispered about layoffs. Some were already updating their resumes. Others stood quietly beside elevators, wondering whether they would still have jobs by the end of the week. Daniel looked around the building. These were not numbers on a report. These were people. People with families. People who depended on their salaries. People who had done nothing wrong. Then the CEO arrived. Mr. Richard walked through the lobby with a face Daniel had never seen before. He looked furious. He entered the executive floor and ordered every senior manager into the boardroom. Daniel continued working nearby. Through the closed doors, voices rose. Someone was being blamed. Someone was being threatened with dismissal. Then Richard shouted, "If I don't get answers today, several of you will not have jobs tomorrow." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. His investigation had predicted this. The company was reaching the point of collapse. But then Daniel remembered something. The night before, he had seen a senior executive leaving the technology department. It was after midnight. The man had no reason to be there. Daniel had also noticed something else. A system access report had been left beside a printer. He had not taken it. He had only seen it. Now he remembered the name printed at the top. It belonged to someone high inside the company. Someone trusted. Someone who had attended every meeting about the crisis. Daniel's hands began to shake. He hurried to the small staff room and opened his notebook. There it was. The name, the time, the date, the system, everything matched. Daniel finally had the connection he needed. But before he could decide what to do, the door suddenly opened. 2 security officers stood there. Behind them was Mr. Harris, the supervisor. "There he is," Harris said. Daniel looked confused. "What happened?" One of the guards stepped forward. "We've been told you accessed restricted information." Daniel's heart dropped. "I didn't." Harris pointed toward Daniel's notebook. "We found company information in his possession." Daniel looked down. For a moment, he could not speak. He understood what was happening. Someone had moved first. The security officer reached for the notebook. Daniel held it tightly. "Please," Daniel said quietly. "You don't understand. Give it to us." Daniel shook his head. "No." The word surprised even him. For years, he had obeyed every order. He had stayed quiet. He had accepted insults. He had allowed people to treat him as if he were invisible. But now he could not surrender. Not when innocent people were about to lose their jobs. Not when the truth was sitting inside that notebook. The guards moved closer. Daniel's eyes filled with pain. He thought about his daughter. He thought about his rent. His job. His entire life. He could lose everything. And for what? For people who had laughed when he tried to help. For managers who had told him to stay in his place. For a company that barely knew his name. But Daniel tightened his grip on the notebook. Because sometimes doing the right thing means standing alone. Even when everyone else has already decided that you are guilty. The security officers closed in. Daniel looked toward the hallway. For the first time, he was no longer afraid of being ignored. He was afraid that the truth would disappear with him. And somewhere inside Sterling Global, the person responsible for the crisis was waiting to see whether the janitor would finally break. The boardroom doors opened slowly. Daniel walked inside between 2 security officers. His cleaning uniform was still the same. His shoes were worn. His hands were rough from years of hard work. But this time, everyone in the room was looking at him. Mr. Richards sat at the head of the long table. Around him were senior managers, department heads, and several company lawyers. Daniel had cleaned this room hundreds of times. He had wiped this table, polished these chairs, collected empty coffee cups after important meetings. But he had never imagined sitting at the table himself. Mr. Harris pointed toward an empty chair. "Sit." Daniel sat quietly. One of the executives looked irritated. Another whispered something to the person beside him. Daniel heard the words. "He's just the janitor." Daniel lowered his eyes. For a moment, the old feeling returned. The feeling of being invisible. Then Mr. Richard looked directly at him. "Daniel, you've been accused of accessing restricted company information." Daniel nodded. "I understand." "Do you admit it?" Daniel took a slow breath. "I admit that I notice things." The room became quiet. Mr. Richard leaned forward. "What things?" Daniel opened his notebook. "I noticed delivery times." Several executives exchanged confused looks. Daniel continued. "I noticed when trucks arrived late. I noticed when they returned. I noticed when certain employees entered restricted areas. And I noticed when delivery records changed." One manager shook his head. "Mr. Richard, this is ridiculous." Daniel looked at him. "Then please let me finish." The room went silent. It was the first time anyone had heard Daniel speak with such confidence. He placed several pages on the table. "These are the dates." Then another page. "These are the delivery failures." Then another. "And these are the system access times." Mr. Richard picked up the papers. His eyes moved across them. Daniel pointed to the first date. On this night, the system showed that a shipment had been delivered at 8:40 p.m. He turned the page. "But I was cleaning the loading area. The truck did not leave until nearly midnight." An executive frowned. Daniel continued. 3 days later, another shipment was marked complete before the truck returned. The room grew quieter. Daniel explained that he had seen these events repeatedly. The executives had been studying computers and reports. Daniel had been watching the real world. He knew when the trucks moved. He knew which doors were used late at night. He knew which employees stayed after everyone else had gone home. He knew which machines made unusual sounds. He knew which reports appeared in the trash after important meetings. Mr. Richards slowly looked up. Who? Daniel paused. Then he pointed toward one of the men sitting at the table. The person responsible is Mr. Collins. The room exploded with shocked reactions. Collins stood immediately. What? Daniel remained calm. You accessed the logistics system before several major failures. Collins shook his head. That's a lie. Daniel placed another document on the table. This shows your access times. Collins looked at the paper. His face changed. Daniel continued. You changed delivery records so failed shipments appeared completed. Then you created problems in the warehouse to make the failures look like employee mistakes. Mr. Richards stared at Collins. Why? For several seconds, Collins said nothing. Then his anger disappeared. His shoulders dropped. Daniel finally revealed the motive. Collins had secretly invested money in a competing company. If Sterling Global lost its largest clients, the competitor would gain them. He had been creating small failures for months, waiting for the company's reputation to collapse. The room fell completely silent. Mr. Richard looked around the table. Then he looked at Daniel. All the expensive consultants, all the managers, all the meetings, all the accusations, and the person who had uncovered the truth had been cleaning their offices every morning. Mr. Harris looked down at the floor. The same man who had laughed at Daniel now could not meet his eyes. The CEO slowly stood. How did you notice all this? Daniel looked at him. I was here. 2 simple words. But they carried years of meaning. He had been there before the executives arrived. He had been there after they left. He had seen what happened when nobody thought anyone was watching. Mr. Richard looked around the room. We almost fired innocent people. Nobody answered. Daniel closed his notebook. For the first time, nobody saw him as a janitor. They saw him as the man who had saved their company. And in that room, something changed forever. The man everyone had ignored had finally been heard. The truth changed everything at Sterling Global. Within hours of Daniel's presentation, the company launched a full investigation. The evidence was no longer just Daniel's notebook. Security records confirmed the access times. System records showed the changes. Delivery reports matched Daniel's observations. And financial records revealed that Collins had been secretly moving money into a competing business. There was nowhere left for him to hide. By the end of the day, Collins was removed from his position. The employees he had tried to blame were called into separate meetings. One by one, they were cleared. The warehouse workers who had spent days fearing for their jobs were finally told the truth. They had done nothing wrong. Some of them cried. Others simply sat in silence, unable to believe that their jobs were safe. Daniel watched from a distance. He felt relieved. That was all he had wanted. He had never cared about being called a hero. He had wanted innocent people to keep their jobs. Over the next few weeks, Sterling Global worked hard to repair the damage. The company contacted its major clients and explained what had happened. Some clients were still angry. Others were willing to listen. The company offered new security measures, stronger delivery checks, and better tracking systems. Slowly, trust began returning. The financial disaster that once seemed unavoidable had been stopped, and everyone knew who had made that possible. Daniel. One evening, after most employees had gone home, Mr. Richard asked Daniel to come to his office. Daniel stood near the door. Come in, Richard said. Daniel walked inside. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Richard looked through the glass walls of his office toward the city. Then he turned around. I underestimated you. Daniel said nothing. I made the mistake of thinking your job title told me what you were capable of. Daniel looked down. Richard continued. You saved this company. Daniel shook his head. The workers helped too. Richard smiled slightly. That's exactly why I want to offer you something. He explained that he wanted Daniel to become part of the company's operations team, not as a janitor, as a problem-solving and facilities operations coordinator, with training and the chance to work directly with management. Daniel was surprised. He had imagined receiving a bonus, maybe a better salary. But this was different. It was an opportunity to use the skills he had developed through years of observing the company. Still, he hesitated. "Mr. Richard, I'm not sure I'm ready." "You've been ready for years," Richard replied. Daniel looked toward the city. He thought about how people had laughed at him. He remembered being told to stay in his place. He remembered standing in the hallway while executives discussed problems he already understood. Then he thought about his daughter. He wanted her to grow up believing that no honest job made a person less valuable. Daniel finally nodded. "I'll accept." But he added one condition. "I don't want people to think I'm better than anyone because of a new title." Richard smiled. "Then don't become that person." From that day forward, Sterling Global began changing. Managers were encouraged to listen to workers at every level. Maintenance staff were invited to share ideas. Warehouse employees were asked what problems they faced. Security teams were included in planning meetings. People were no longer judged only by their titles. They were judged by their work, character, and ideas. And Daniel's story became a lesson throughout the company. The quiet janitor who had once been invisible was now one of the people management turned to when something went wrong. But Daniel never forgot where he came from. Every morning, when he walked through the building, he still greeted the cleaners. He still thanked the security guards. He still listened to the warehouse workers. Because his new position had not changed who he was. It had simply given the world a chance to finally see him. And for Daniel, that was the greatest redemption of all. 6 months later, Sterling Global was stronger than it had been in years. The clients who once threatened to leave had returned. Orders were moving on time. The delivery system had been rebuilt. New security measures were in place, and employees were no longer afraid that every mistake would cost them their jobs. The company had recovered millions. But the biggest change could not be measured in money. It could be seen in the people. Daniel was no longer invisible. When he walked through the building, people greeted him. Managers asked for his opinion. Employees stopped him in hallways to share problems they had noticed. Even the security guards treated him like an old friend. But Daniel never changed the way he treated people. Every morning, he still greeted the cleaning staff. He thanked the security guards. He listened patiently to assistants and junior employees. If someone had an idea, Daniel listened before deciding whether it was useful. He knew what it felt like to speak and have nobody care. He never wanted anyone else to feel that way. Even Mr. Richard had changed. The CEO was still demanding. He still cared about results. But now, he walked through the building more often. He spoke with warehouse workers. He asked assistants about their daily problems. He listened to maintenance workers. Sometimes, he even stopped to ask the cleaning staff what could be improved. The change surprised everyone. One afternoon, a young employee suggested a small improvement to the delivery process. In the past, he would have kept the idea to himself. This time, he spoke. And management listened. Soon, more employees began doing the same. People who had spent years staying silent started sharing ideas. The company discovered solutions that had been hiding inside its own walls. Daniel watched it all with quiet pride. One evening, he stood near the same hallway where he had once been laughed at. He remembered the days when people had looked at his uniform and assumed he had nothing important to say. He remembered being told to stay in his place. He remembered carrying a cleaning cart while the company nearly collapsed around him. A small smile appeared on his face. For years, Daniel had thought being ignored was only a weakness. Now he understood something different. Being invisible had allowed him to see what others could not. He saw the late trucks, the forgotten reports, the quiet movements, the small problems that executives walked past every day. He had been watching while everyone else was busy talking. Daniel looked across the busy office. The greatest victory was not that the company had survived. It was that people had finally learned to listen. They learned that a cleaner could have an idea. A security guard could notice a problem. A warehouse worker could find a solution. And a quiet employee sitting in the corner might understand something everyone else had missed. Daniel smiled and returned to work. The man who was once ignored had taught an entire company one lesson they would never forget. *** never judge the value of a person by the job they perform. **. 1 year after the crisis, Sterling Global stood stronger than ever. The company had grown. Its clients trusted it again. Its employees worked with confidence. And the story of the crisis had become part of the company's history. But Daniel never forgot how close everything had come to collapse. One evening, he stood near the loading area and watched trucks leave the building. Everything was running smoothly now. No unexplained delays. No missing shipments. No false records. Daniel smiled quietly. He remembered the days when nobody had believed him. He remembered the laughter, the warnings, the accusations, and the moment he had stood in that boardroom, holding the evidence that could save hundreds of people. He had once believed his uniform made him invisible. Now he understood the truth. A uniform only tells you what a person does for a living. It does not tell you how intelligent they are. It does not tell you how much they have suffered. It does not tell you what they are capable of becoming. A few days later, Mr. Richard called an all-company meeting. Hundreds of employees gathered in the main hall. Daniel stood quietly near the back. Then the CEO stepped onto the stage. "There is someone I want every person here to recognize." Daniel looked around. Then Richard said his name. "Daniel." The room filled with applause. Daniel slowly walked forward. He felt embarrassed by the attention. Richard shook his hand. This company survived because one person refused to ignore what everyone else overlooked. Daniel lowered his head. He did not see himself as a hero. He had simply done what he believed was right. As the applause continued, Daniel looked at the people around him. He saw cleaners, guards, assistants, managers, executives. For a moment, they were all simply people. People capable of making mistakes. People capable of learning. People capable of changing the world in ways nobody expected. Daniel smiled. He finally understood that his greatest strength had never been his position. It had been his willingness to notice what others ignored. And that became the lesson Sterling Global never forgot. **** never underestimate someone because of the position they hold in life. ***. Talent can hide behind a uniform. Brilliance can hide behind humility. And sometimes, the person everyone walks past is the person who sees the truth most clearly. One overlooked man had walked into Sterling Global with a mop and a cleaning cart. He walked out having changed an entire company. And that was the story of Daniel, the man behind the solution.